time it is. It is time for Beyond the Steps. Thank you for joining us. I am Melissa McDaniel Grisham from Turning Point Dance Creations here with my amazing co-host Bree Zabrowski from Apollo Performance, and we are joined by the incomparable Emily Bufford to talk today about the importance of working on the alignment for the dancer, not just the choreography. This is a topic that we need to talk about. I say it, I'm gonna say it a little bit later. It has been burning in me to say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Not only is this important to talk about for injury prevention, for managing injury, but it's just the right thing to do for the dancer. So we'll get into that. If you are joining us for the first time, we are a weekly video podcast that talks about all of the issues that relate to performance athletics, including racism and equity, dance, medicine and science, psychology, nutrition, mindset, wellness, all the things in between. And we tackle the tough issues. We don't mince words. We give different perspectives, and we want to hear yours as well. So as you are watching this show, please make sure that you comment, you like, you share, you call your friends over, you tag people, you do whatever you need to do to draw people into this conversation. If you want to share this later, you can find all of the episodes, including this one, on YouTube at Apollo Performance and at TP Dance Creations. Without further ado, I would love to have Bree introduce Emily.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome back to Beyond the Steps. We're so excited to welcome back our dear friend, Emily Bufford. She can find her on faculty at NYC's Broadway Dance Center and Steps on Broadway. She continues to have a massive impact on the New York dance scene, an incredible educator. She's the producer of Young Choreographers Festival, which we're going to talk about. If you don't know about this event, it's something you need to be aware of. It's just an incredible event for our community and for the future of dance to continue supporting and nurturing the choreographers of tomorrow. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And she's also a sought after educator around the US and abroad. You can find more about Emily at emilybufford.com. And we'll again put that up later. Emily, what's up? Welcome back.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I love y'all. Happy Friday. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you back. We always have fantastic conversations. We've been blessed to have you as a guest on this show multiple times in our 4 seasons, and we're very grateful to have you back. So you are always up to something. You always got something going on, new and exciting. So tell us what's happening. What are you up to these days?
That makes me sound scandalous, which I like.
Always something happening.
Always up to something.
In the best
in the best way. No, I'm so grateful for that. People feel that way. I am teaching currently a lot of classes between Broadway Dance Center and Steps on Broadway, varying levels, different styles. I'm teaching for the Steps Academy pre-professional program, obviously producing Young Choreographers Festival, which is my passion project. And then we actually just are adding new programming this year. We're presenting a showcase, an informal showing called Beginnings at the end of January through YCF for actually for all ages and all genres, kind of as an evening of first drafts. So for anybody who's making work where they're feeling like it needs to get some legs in front of an audience, it'll have some audience Q&A and feedback at the end of the presentation. And I'm really excited to be able to provide that to the community. I think it's something that has existed in the past, and it's been a little since the pandemic. Some of the programming sadly didn't make it all the way through, and I feel really fortunate that our programming did. And so I feel like since we did get to survive through the 2 years that we weren't able to have presentations, that it's time to really make sure, not that we don't already give back and do our best to give back, but to really make sure we're able to give back, and not just to our YCF age bracket, but to all.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this because I think when we're talking about nurturing the choreographers tomorrow and making sure we're leaving the dance community better than we found it, I think that's exactly what you do. And there could not be a better person for this topic today to have this discussion. So we have a lot of ground to cover. Melissa, let's kick off our first segment of questions. And again, for everybody just tuning in, we're talking about the importance of working on alignment for the dancer and not just for the choreography. So what is that importance, and why do we need to shift our focus a little bit? So Melissa, take it away.
Yes, I couldn't wait to be the first person to ask a question because I have been wrestling with a related topic, I guess, because it feels very common nowadays. Everybody knows I'm in the competitive dance space. I teach and direct a competitive company. I judge. I'm all over the place. And it feels like it is so common for teachers to have taught to the specific piece of choreography that has been given to the students versus teaching foundational technique. So when you see them in a different space that might not be that piece of set choreography, it's like, who is this child? That's not the same child that just did that contemporary piece or that lyrical piece or that tap piece. Do you see this as a trend, Emily?
I do. Actually, when I saw that this was going to be our topic, y'all both know I'm a nerd. Everybody in the world can know I'm a nerd if you don't know that already. My excitement level was so high because I do see it. I teach a lot of different levels of dancers. I'm really fortunate in that when I teach open class, I see not only different levels, but a very wide age bracket of dancer. And I also see dancers who come visit New York from all over the country and from the world, which is it's really a blessing to have that diversity in a classroom all at the same time. And so I definitely have noticed, and I'm very cognizant of it in my own personal classroom of how I train dancers, that we are absolutely kind of allowing some things to slide for the sake of choreography being presented a certain way, that then when I see them come into class and do, my technical warm up, and I'm like, oh, wait, you're malaligned as you're standing, or, oh, your torso is like really far forward and you're not actually on top of your legs. But then I see the kid do, whatever, I call them party tricks, whatever party trick that they're really well able to execute. And then you're like, oh, okay, the focus has been placed on this one thing as opposed to on this all-encompassing thing. And it translates really interestingly because the young dancers who understand alignment, even if they can't do that party trick yet, they will eventually be able to do it if they need to or if they want to, because alignment is forever, kind of. I mean, as bodies change, like as kids grow and they have these growth spurts, alignment will change over the course of a dancer's lifetime. But making sure that they're equipped with that information versus just making sure that they're equipped with the information of how to do that one isolated action or that one isolated dance. They're two very different things, and it's very prevalent and at the forefront of what I'm seeing in young dancers these days, not from all places, but from many places. Right.
And so when you're in a open class space or in a convention space, you can see that difference in dancers who may have been trained one way or the other. Do you find that they struggle more in a certain style or a certain setting? Like, do they struggle more when they come to your open classes versus when you might see them perform somewhere, I would imagine?
Yes, 100%. So I do see a good amount of kids that do competition. I always share openly, I grew up doing competition. I think it is a wonderful thing in many ways. And on the flip side of that, I think sometimes there's some toxicity there because the headspace goes to like, what are we going to do to make sure that our kids win? And winning is not necessarily a finite idea, because if you think about like winning in the long run, it's making sure that your students get what they need to be successful when they graduate from your studio and they go to college or they go into the real world, and then how are they thriving there versus the win in that moment of like, my kid is going on stage with I teach lyrical and contemporary. So let's say with their lyrical solo, and I've drilled this one idea, and they go out on stage and they're beautiful and they're brilliant at that one idea or that one piece of choreography, because it's been like to the point where they can do it with their eyes closed and upside down and like laying on the floor making snow angels, and you'd be like, oh, great choreography. But you take them out of that like very specific subsect of what they're capable of doing well, and because the focus has been on this isolated idea instead of on this more broadened perspective of an idea, they do tend to struggle finding alignment is a very personal thing. Everybody's body, I'm a firm believer in this, everybody's body is different, even though they're similar.
Yeah.
Like structurally, sure, most of our physicalities have more similarities than differences, but not everybody's spinal column is exactly the same. Some young dancers have more space between their vertebrae than others. I personally have very little space between mine, so my upper back is tight. One of my assistants has a ton of space and can take her head to her bum. Making sure that all dancers understand what their placement can be, not even should be, but what it can be, so that they feel supported by their body first and foremost, and that they feel strong in their body, but so that they're also supported when they get other choreography. Because malalignment leads to injury. And so if a young dancer has been drilled on just this 2.5 minutes of choreography, but then they go into an open classroom, or they go into somebody else's classroom, or they have a guest teacher where the choreography is maybe not as familiar, or it's proficient in a different way, not being able to find that alignment for their own personal facility with accessibility, I do think it's a little bit problematic, because we want to make sure that we're training young dancers to be safe first and foremost. Like, I want the 12-year-olds I teach to be able to dance until they're 70 if they want to. And so the importance of it is something that I think it's really, like, we all should be thinking about each dancer as an individual when we look at what their structure should be doing, can be doing, what is their potential in what their body will or won't do. And as I'm saying, you know, what it won't do, I think also keeping that in the forefront of our minds too. If you have a student whose hips are not quite as open, we shouldn't be forcing their hips open. And we need to be willing to have honest dialogue with our students about, you know, if your hip structure or your pelvic structure is this, it might mean that your leg can't do that thing that that dancer over there whose pelvic structure is really open can do. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think, you know, having that dialogue and being honest with our young dancers about, like, what is possible for your facility, not the facility, your facility.
Right.
Also,
and I think that's hard, because as giving as this industry is, there's also, and we've talked about this quite a bit recently, there's also a little bit of ego in this business that you cannot escape on the behalf of the teachers, the choreographers, and the students and the parents, right? Like, nobody wants to be the one to admit, like, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. It's not in their cards right now. And that's okay. But the reality is, we're sacrificing long-term gain and long-term technique for the now, for the instantaneous gratification of the appearance of success, right? Because and in that process, we're creating bad habits. And I think that is what you're saying. And I think that's what we really need to examine, is how can we take the ego out? Because all of this is really coming from the pressure that the choreographers and the teachers are putting on themselves and the students to be cleaner, be better, get the win, right? And also, and when there's a plethora of solos, duos, and trios in this industry, almost too many, right? Like, I think we need to all dial a little bit. And one is good, right? But like, but there's also that pressure too of, like, I have to do X, Y, and Z because so and so did X, Y, and Z, and I'm gonna add a double Z and a triple Z to mine because they did
X, and I'm gonna add Z to it, and we're gonna do this.
Yeah, it's a constant keeping up with the Joneses on all sides, that we really have to have the discipline and the awareness to dial it back and go, what is the ultimate goal here? And I think that's where the struggle is. So that being said, Emily, when you're working with dancers, where do you see the biggest gaps? Is it foundational technique? Is it artistry and style? Is it memory and retention? What are you seeing as the gaps there?
That's such a loaded question, because I teach open class, and I love teaching open class. I know it's not for everybody, because it's a different challenge every single time you walk into the room, depending upon who comes that day. But all of those things are a challenge. I see dancers who come from studios where they've drilled, you know, pirouettes, but they have no style and no performance. And then I see kids who come from studios where they've been told they don't need ballet and they have a ton of style, but they don't have technique that coincides with that style. And so you're working to clean up their foundations, but they'll give you everything. You don't have to beg them to perform because they will put their heart and soul into it. But like, they also don't know how to stand in a proper parallel.
Right.
And so then you have to work on that with that dancer. And so it really is running the full gamut right now. And that's okay. You know, it's a beautiful thing. It's a lot of perspectives thrown into the pot. We've kind of always have this big dance soup in this country and everywhere where there's no governing body. And so there's no like, everybody has to do this. Everybody has to be teaching that, for better and for worse. But for me, perspective wise, I think, you know, the most important thing to make sure your students have is their foundational ideas. And that's not just for their jazz and their contemporary. If they're doing street styles, they should be taking foundations there. Obviously, I'm an advocate of ballet. The work that I do requires that element of proficiency. But I think, you know, there's technical proficiency in all genres. And no matter what room your students are walking into, making sure that they have that as their baseline. I always kind of joke that it's like building a wedding cake, and that the first layer of the wedding cake would be your technique so that you can layer everything else on top of it. So like, here's your base layer of your technique. And then on top of that, there's your style. And then on top of that, there's your intention and your storytelling and all of those things. And so, you know, it's kind of studio dependent. I see myself going like this, but like, it's kind of studio dependent or teacher dependent, because
I agree.
Every educator is coming from their perspective, which is a beautiful thing. Like, and there is room for all of these perspectives. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is, are we keeping our students physically and of course mentally and emotionally, but like physically safe is what you're asking of that dancer. Have you given them the information to be able to go into any room and do the choreography that they're being
That's it. That's it.
Right.
Because
they're not going to hurt themselves.
Yeah, because in my mind, I'm sitting here listening to you talk and I'm thinking, well, if the goal is just to establish solid foundation, that's really where we're going to do them the most favors. It's going to take longer for it to get in the body and for it to feel comfortable and feel right. But we're not creating those bad habits, you know, for the sake of the win, or the instant gain, right? And then also we're gonna improve memory and retention and artistry and style, because they're not going to be thinking so much about execution and technique when they're learning new material, when they go and take an open class, because they're already going to have that built. It's going to be on the inside. It's going to be connected to that muscle memory. They won't have to think about that then they can work. But that process takes so much longer. And I think that's where we have to develop a certain level of patience with the process. And that's maybe what is missing. So I know we have to get to the next segment, Melissa, but I do want to ask like one more I'm going off script for a second. But do you feel like there is an age where we stop teaching foundational technique, almost like, okay, at this point you either have it or you don't? Is that a thing? And do you agree with that thought process? Because, and the reason I'm asking this, you teach at the biggest studios in the country, right? Steps on Broadway Dance Center, two of the biggest meccas for class and style and learning what's new in the dance world and what's you know, what's happening in the dance world all goes on in those doors. They're magical spaces. But you know, you still teach technique. I don't care who walks in your door, you teach technique. But I would say you are the minority when you're talking about professional level classes. That is not something, the minute, like when I lived in LA, I won't say all of the time, but I would maybe say 90 to 95% of the time, you're walking in class already expected to be warmed up, and it's instant choreography time. And it's not 4 or 5 8 counts that we work on, and then the rest of the time it's technique. It is all. So by the time you're done, you've got this combination that's like 20 counts of 8. And you're like, I don't even know what just happened for the first 8 counts
you have
of 8.
A full piece that you can take to competition.
And granted, my issue was memory retention. Like for sure, that was my challenge as a dancer, and my muscle that I had to work out. But still, like sometimes it's so excessively much. Like, let's take some time and break down the technique of this, right?
Yeah. I think depending upon what a specific dancer's needs are, I do teach technique. I do a 35 to 40-minute warm up in every single class that I teach.
Wow.
That will not be thrown
Out
off.
of an hour and a half class, or an hour?
Hour and a
Hour.
half. Yeah,
Okay.
90-minute classes. When I teach a 2-hour class, I will do close to an hour.
Wow.
I just think that element of proficiency, I always joke, like, you want to know that your technique has your back. I don't want to have to think about it while I'm dancing. I want to know that it's going to work for me, and that anything I am going to try to do, I don't have to think about the technical element of it. I get to think about, like, how do I feel? And I'm a big advocate of emotiveness, English language, emoting, excuse me, in your dancing.
We can make up words. It's good. We can make up words.
Let's claim it today.
Let's do it.
But how can you be emotive if you're having to think about the technical, like the way it's going to work? And so if you do a solid warm up and you've broken down those ideas and you've really done that element of class in a way that puts it in your body, and I do think repetition is the key. I mean, you can build a nice foot by doing tendus. You don't have to put your foot. I'm not an advocate of those foot stretch. I don't want to use the word hate, but I think they're dangerous. And so stretch your foot, hit your demi, hit your full elongation, hit your demi on the way in, bring it into first, feel your inner thighs pulling towards the downstage. You're standing in alignment with the top of your head through your tailbone for your body, and looking around at the dancers in the room and going, okay, this person has a sway back. This person tucks their pelvis. How many of these dancers can I, because I'll spend a lot of my warm up walking around. I have my assistants and they do it. And I walk around and I kind of like, you bring your torso a little bit forward. Let's pull your ribs in. Let's make sure your arms in first are a little bit taller. Feel your shoulder blades lengthen towards your tailbone. Like general corrections sometimes that just are thrown out the window when they're not being focused on.
Well, and let's be honest, those people that are probably hearing those corrections from you probably haven't heard a correction like that in years.
Possibly.
Like, honestly, unless they've been in your class. I mean, it is just the reality of where it's at. So everybody out there, all y'all, it's not too late to teach technique. You can teach it at any level. I agree. So
yeah, and please do it because, I'll get these dancers who come to my classroom and they want technique. It's not that dancers, and young dancers specifically, my observation all year long, especially over the summer, though, with the summer intensives that I teach at, where I see kids from a lot of studios from all over the country, they're hungry for it. They want that information. They do not shy away from that dialogue. If anything, they are very leaned in. Their ears are open, because one of the things that technical work will do for you is it will make your life easier.
Yeah.
It's hard. How can we make dance easier? We can do the proficiency element of it so that when something isn't working, these dancers of all ages, I mean, I say this openly, I have a 71-year-old former professional dancer who takes my class at Steps every Saturday. She is full out. She does everything. It is one of the most inspiring things I have ever seen in my life, honestly. And I watch her dance and she self-corrects. And she's able to self-correct because her foundation is there. So when these young dancers are given that information and they can take it with them everywhere they go, they're able to make those notes for themselves in real time. They don't need somebody to come put a hand on them. And I'm saying segue, as you put a hand, consent is important. If you're going to put a hand on a young dancer, please ask them if they're comfortable with it. But before you have to even put a hand on them, they've looked in the mirror or they felt something that isn't working and they fix it. And that translates into their pre-professional level dancing, and that translates into their professional level dancing. And you've created you've helped to create a hireable dancer, because time is money and money is time. And if I have a dancer in my rehearsal process who's technical, who doesn't have to think about that work, that they can put the emotion in right away and dance it full out and not have to make those small adjustments, that saves me time.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
But this, I mean, we're making this sound really simplistic and we're just saying it, but it's a painful process. I mean, I can say from an educator standpoint, director standpoint, it is definitely not an easy path, and it is not an easy process, and it is time consuming, and it takes thought, and it takes care, and it takes consistency, but the results are what we are talking about, and why it's important to spend that time in on the technique and lay that foundation. You wouldn't build a house without that a foundation,
Right.
a solid foundation. You
Hope
should
not.
build a career without it either. And if you don't want to go dance professionally, like Emily said, as long as you want to dance, this makes it so that you can, as long as you want to, but at least so you're not in pain for the latter half of your life. If you don't dance ever again, you get to your 30s, 40s, 50s, it doesn't have to be painful. Right. So, and that's, we're just going to keep talking about that every single week. But in the meantime, this is Beyond the Steps. We're talking with our dear friend, Emily Bufford, about what is the importance of working on alignment for the dancer and not just for the choreography. Great topic today. Please like, share, subscribe this episode. We want to get this information out into the community. We're all about education and resources here at Beyond the Steps. So help us get this message out. Like, share, subscribe. Moving on to our next segment, Emily, proper alignment is a huge part of minimizing injury and dancing longer and healthier. We all know that. We all talk about that. We just ended the last segment with this. What are the dangers of not teaching proper alignment with consideration for each dancer's body and capacity?
I think one of the biggest dangers is that it opens the door really widely to injury. I mean, we have young dancers who have not been taught how to lengthen through their lumbar spine. They're compressed. They then have back injuries. We have dancers who have not been taught what proper tracking looks like from their hip down their knee over wherever that happens to fall over their foot. I pride myself that I teach parallel to the mechanic, not to the aesthetic. I talk about it openly all the time. You'll hear somebody say parallel toes and heels in alignment. But if you look at a foot, even on a skeleton, a foot is not a straight line from a big toe to a heel or a pinky toe to a heel usually. And so you're asking a young dancer to stand in a way that is unnatural to their body. And so somewhere in that tracking up their leg, there is malalignment. And so really making sure that they understand that placement so that we eliminate hopefully the room for a hip injury or a knee injury or an ankle injury or a foot injury. I mean, it really does just kind of close the door a little bit to the opportunity for the body to get hurt when we teach young dancers how to stand in a way that is correct for their body. And I cannot emphasize the word there more importantly, because everybody's body is different. They are structurally similar, but they are different. And I think, we're going into the year 2024. What's that saying? If you know better, do better. Like, we know, we have the ability to know now. I mean, many, many, many years ago, we didn't have the ability to understand that, but as understanding evolves, we as educators have to evolve, and how we look at dancers has to have evolution as well. And so if I'm looking at a dancer in front of me and they're sway backed, or they have scoliosis, or they like to walk like a model and they stick their pelvis out and they're putting compression into their lumbar, we have to look at that person and go, okay, this is what that person needs for their alignment, not a general offering of like, well, top of your head to your tail. What does that mean for some people? Ribs forward over your pelvis is neutral spine, neutral pelvis, but some people are not aligned that way. Everybody's body, is worthy of being looked at by an educator as its own individual structure. And I think, not that we lost the plot on this, but we haven't been willing in all capacities to step into the plot on this and be like, wait a second, this dancer is built this way. What does that mean for what they need out of my classroom?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then how do we then, make sure that each dancer in our space is being given information that is best to their benefit? Some people are pronated. Some people are, my feet my feet are quite supinated. My toes curve like this and my ankles pronate. Like, for me, parallel looks like I'm pigeon toed if I'm hips to knees over my ankles, and that happens to fall over my foot in a certain way. If I was working for stage, I want to be honest here with everybody who's listening. If I had to work for stage, we would have a conversation about aesthetic, because an audience member is, of course, going to look at that and be like, why is that
pigeon toed? Right.
But in class, I am a firm believer that in class we work to the mechanic.
Yeah. Oh wow. And I think that is a key point. I'm so glad that we ended with that, because I think that is huge, especially in the competition space. It's like we are so scared to teach differently to stage versus teach differently to the mechanic in class. It kind of all melds together. That leads me into my next thing. Do you think that this is all, this tendency to not do teach to the dancer is perpetuated by this competitive dance culture? And I'm gonna expand on that to say, we reward in competitive dance one thing. Like we don't give these dancers the freedom to say, you know what, my specialty is performance and style. I would like to compete in the performance and style division. I would like to compete in the party tricks division. Like,
Yeah.
so, ice skaters get this opportunity to say, I'm a free skater. I
Yeah.
am a compulsory skills. Like I do the short program. I do same thing with gymnasts. I vault. I floor exercise. I do, and we don't have that. The expectation is that we're going to put these kids up here and they're going to be good at every single thing that is on that rubric that we judge them on. And I think that's just so unfair. Like, I was not the greatest jumper in the world. I have hips. I'm curvy. Like, it wasn't going to be my thing. If I had had the opportunity to track myself in a way where I could show my strengths and be judged on that only, I feel like that type of space leaves room for, like you say, teaching to the mechanics. So do you think, I say all that to say, off on my tangent, but I say all that to say, do you think that this competitive dance culture is hindering that?
Mm, yes and no. I mean, in some ways, yes. I think it's dependent on the specific competition, and even broken down further, I think it's dependent on the specific judge. I know, I'll use myself as an example. I don't judge frequently anymore, but when I was judging, I made it a point to truly look at what I was seeing in front of me at face value. So, is this dancer a good turner? Great. Are they emoting? Sure. Are they technically trained? Like, is that good quote unquote pirouette happening on a releve that's like this high off the floor?
Mhm.
That doesn't really count as a releve. So then let's circle back to that. Are they actually a good turner? Or did they just do a bunch of spins?
Right, or spins, right.
And so I think, a judge who is looking for dancing will reward the right dancer.
Mhm.
They'll see the dancer with the proficiency, they'll see the dancer who has the emotional performance, and hopefully in that circumstance that dancer will be rewarded.
Mhm.
And I think that is really the underlying issue there. It's not necessarily the studio or the kid themselves. Kids are wonderful in so many ways, and one of the ways they're wonderful is that they trust. And
Mhm.
so we're putting these dancers on stage doing what they've trusted their teacher is doing in their best interest.
Mhm.
And so, not to say that anybody's, purposefully doing something that's not in a child's best interest, but if you have a kid who is great at this thing over here and not as great at this thing over here, and you put them on stage doing this thing,
Right.
I'm not an advocate of that. I
Mhm.
think, I try to send my kids out on stage at their absolute best. How is that young dancer going to feel when they come off stage? And I want them to feel fulfilled, and I want them to feel proud of themselves. And
Mhm.
I want them to not be like, oh, that thing that I'm not good at is what I just had to do on stage.
Well, when we
Mhm.
talk about performance anxiety, that is something that you're really, in some cases, some of these kids are being set up for failure because they're being asked to do things that their body just can't really do, and they know it,
Yeah.
right? But they don't want to disappoint anybody, and it causes that extra anxiety. So then this is a great segue into this off the tangent question, or off the beaten path question of, you know, what I saw and saw a lot when I was directing. We had technique classes built into the schedule every single week. And then we had rehearsals, separate rehearsals, but that was very rare. You did not see that often. You oftentimes saw, classes turning into rehearsals or rehearsal sessions that just, so what ultimately ends up happening, what I discovered, we would be rehearsing our, 30-minute rehearsal every week per dance. And, but then our neighbors would be rehearsing since like they did a few technique classes through September, October, and then everything just became rehearsal constantly nonstop. And I get there's some things, you have an injury, you have to restage, things like that. Like things happen that you just have to adjust and bob and weave. But as a rule, you tend to see the technique classes get thrown out the window pretty early on in the year. And so when you look at the grand scheme of a season, these kids are really only getting a couple months of technique class, and the rest is just working on those same patterns and movements and choreography. And so is that also contributing to this issue?
Probably. I mean, yeah, probably. I am fortunate. I grew up at a studio that had separate rehearsal times from our technique classes. And with very minimal exception, I would imagine it's still the same way. It's been quite some time since I was competing. But, giving up the technique classes to drill a routine, that only benefits that one routine, whereas the technique class all year benefits everything. And so I do think it probably is contributory to the overall issue. I would love to see it stop happening. Honestly, I think, if we're really trying to set our students up for success, we need to make sure that they're getting their training. And drilling a dance is not really training a dancer. Drilling a dance is drilling a dance. Training a dancer is giving them information and tools and respectfully even coping mechanism, because they go and they audition for things and they do get them, and that's exciting, but they also don't get them, and then they're sad, and you want to make sure that they have skills to handle when they're upset about something. And, perhaps that ties in also to the notion of drilling dances. Why are we drilling dances? To win. What happens when those kids drill that dance all year and they still don't win? And I know that I'm like, I hear it and I'm like, oh, that sounded so scandalous to say out loud. But like, what happens when you drill that jazz dance and then some kid shows up who's, trained and drills their dances? Like, what happens when the kid who dances 50 hours a week shows up and beats your kids who dance 20 hours a week? We're not talking about kids who dance 1 hour a week. Like, and those kids are valuable too, and they deserve the proper information and training as well. But like, is that then all for naught? Like, you drilled a dance and it didn't even win?
Right.
What a waste of effort. You could have been working on technique.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That's a great, that's a great way to put that, because the dances are done after a season and the technique lasts forever.
Right.
So it's a great point. It's a great way to think about it. Interesting.
For those of you who are just joining us for that amazing light bulb moment that just went off, this is Beyond the Steps. Bing! We need a sound effect. Bing! This is Beyond the Steps, and we're talking to Emily Bufford about the importance of teaching alignment to the dancer and not just to the choreography. This has been an amazing conversation thus far. We still have a few more questions, but if you want to go back and watch this episode from the beginning, please run over to YouTube. Don't walk, run over to YouTube and go to Apollo Performance or TP Dance Creations. Start it from the beginning. Like, share, comment, engage. Let us know what you think. Call somebody, tell them to go watch, share the link, anything and everything. We want to hear your opinion, and we want this information out as much as we can possibly get it. I want to talk a little bit about the logistics of even doing this. So this type of differentiated teaching can probably be tough in a very large class setting, I would imagine. Do you have specific strategies that you can share that might make that more efficient, like going and evaluating each dancer? How do you manage that in a class setting, class period?
I mean, it definitely is more challenging when class starts to get larger, or in a convention room. It's definitely a challenge. But, my job as an educator is to educate, and that is inclusive of making sure that I do my best to tap into any child in the room who needs further information, not better information, just perhaps further or different information that will help them thrive in whatever it is they're doing. And so for me, I walk around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I typically bring an assistant with me so that I have the privilege and the luxury of being able to do so that I have somebody who can be a visual representation of what it is that I'm asking a room of dancers to do. And that, enables me to weave my way around the room and offer that feedback and, tap into a dancer if I see them. One of the things that I see frequently these days is really narrow fourth positions in parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And, then talking about to the room about, your body structure is your body structure and what is hips width apart for you. Because I do, it's like a pandemic of like trying to stand on a balance beam in fourth position. And then we go to do something that preps from that placement, or I do a series in my warm up where we're upside down in our parallel fourth with our hands off the floor and trying to press down to releve. And it's challenging if you're not aligned for what your body needs. And so if I see a dancer, I'll just kind of, ask them to step wider, but I do my best to make my way around the space. And, sometimes in a larger room, dancers that need smaller, corrections, I can address the room. I can stop and offer the feedback to everybody. But if I do see that there's a dancer who is having a larger situation, I don't want to say it's a problem. It's never a problem. It's something that can be resolved with just making some adjustments and playing around with how they're standing and making sure that they're using their body at its most effective and most efficient, understanding where muscularly they need to be actively engaged, understanding where there needs to be length. If I see a child who is struggling or an adult or anywhere on the gamut between, I'll make sure that I make my way to them and I will do my best to help them find what works for their facility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also a great point too for in the pre-professional and professional setting is like, you also have to put in the effort to like walk around and pay attention to that. And that's where that ego, statement came in earlier is a lot of times you see like, I'm going to get out all the choreography that I had planned and I'm going to get to it. And I really want to tape this combo and I want to video it and I want to, put it up on social and all the things. Right. And all those things seem to take priority over actually teaching it sometimes. And so I think that's just a good PSA to anybody at that level, too. You can still do this. Like you can still put in the effort and walk around it. It takes some extra thought and preparation and all of those things. But, that it's a great segue into the final question before we go to homework is, are there training or resources that you would suggest to teachers to help them gain the knowledge and the awareness on how to be better about differentiating their teaching? Or is this something that like, if you need to have a resource for this, then maybe we need to examine that a little more closely. Like maybe teaching at a certain level is not what you should be doing. I mean, that sounds harsh, but I mean, let's be real.
I agree with it sounds harsh, but let's be real. If you feel like you don't have the resources to be able to offer your students the correct information, a kinesiology class would be helpful. An anatomy class would be helpful. A biomechanics class would be helpful. Because even in ballet, not all ballet teachers are enforcing correct alignment. Oftentimes in more traditional Russian style ballet, I grew up taking Chichetti style ballet from one of the teachers I took with, and it teaches a very, very, very overcrossed fourth and fifth position. And my hips are open, but they're not that open. I can't work in that 180 degree, like straight line flat position. And most people can't. Most people's structure doesn't accommodate for that. And so I would love to say there's a dance opportunity that gives you this information. And there are teachers who teach anatomy and kinesiology and biomechanics. And if you can find, or dance medicine, if you can find somebody who does that, sugar foot therapy would be a prime example actually of somewhere where you can go and get information that will be correct, that focuses on proper alignment to the individual dancer. I love their content. I think they're so brilliant and so generous in what they offer, especially with free content online. Like shout out Sugarfoot Therapy, like you can do it for free on Instagram.
What's up, Katie? Also Leah Bueno, our friend Leah Bueno, she's a movement specialist and she helps with all of that as well. And so, I just think like we go back to, in an industry with no standardization or governing body, there really isn't that catch-all. But that's where we go back to, Melissa, what we've talked about so many years on the show is building those relationships within your community and your PTs and your find those dance medicine specialists, find the kinesiologists, the people that can come in and give those classes to the studio. But it starts with you having the really honest conversations and the responsibility. I mean, let's call it what it is. It's a responsibility at this point as an owner, as a director, to be super honest about what your capabilities, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and filling in those gaps accordingly. And I think that may be where we're faltering a little bit is everybody thinks that they've got it all figured out because they learned it from their teacher. And in reality, we know so much more than our teachers ever did at this point about what's good and what's not good. And we will continue learning. There are going to be people 10 years from now that know more than we do.
And I hope they do.
More than the best educators, because science is going to tell us that, and so I think if we're not listening, we're shirking our responsibility a little bit, and we're not having those honest conversations. We're shirking our responsibilities a little bit. So, a little harsh convo there for sure, but important to consider.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. And it circles all the way back to the dialogue about like losing your ego when you walk into the classroom. One of the things that I love about being an educator, and I get it, we get our dream careers, and like my dream was to be a great educator, but being an educator means when you walk into the room that you're there for the students in the room. You're not there, to film your combo. You're not there to have a video shoot. You're not there to have a rehearsal. You're there to teach whatever that means for the dancers in your space that day and on any given day. And I know, at the studio level, you see your same kids every class. When I teach my Steps Academy kids, I see my kids every class. I have a syllabus for the year. We're working on things. That is the trajectory. But your job as a teacher, and I hear myself and I sound a little bit preachy, but your job as a teacher is to teach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how are you keeping your kids safe? Are you giving them information that serves them not just today, but for forever in their tomorrows until they either get to somebody who is more equipped in it than you are, and taking that step for yourself and going, I know my level of education brings me to this place, but like they're going to go here and somebody else there can get them to the next place.
Right.
Okay with that, and knowing that that's a great thing. And just, looking around the room and going, what is each student's need in this moment? And if their need from you that day is to do 20 counts of 8 and then film it at the end of class because they need to see what it looks like, fine. But is that usually the need? Not really.
Yeah.
So,
what is it serving? What is that serving? Yeah, absolutely. And for those that are just joining, we just finished our last segment of questions with Emily Bufford. We've been talking today about the importance of working on alignment for the dancer and not just for the choreography, and why we need to shift focus a little bit. It's been a great conversation. I encourage you to go back and watch it from the beginning. If you want to hear the full episode or any of our episodes, season 1 through our current season 4, you can find those recordings on YouTube at Apollo Performance and at TP Dance Creation. So please go check those out, like, share, and subscribe while you're at it, because we need to get this out into the community. They need to hear this. We are talking about all things that affect performance athletes. It's just really great evidence-based information, great perspective to consider, especially as we head through and into competition season coming up here. So Melissa, it's homework time.
Homework time. I get to ask for homework. So
yeah.
Every single week, Emily knows because she's been with us many times. And if you are a regular viewer, we give homework. So we would like for Emily to give one thing that our viewers can do between now and next Friday. That's 7 days. One small step they can take to make progress in this area. What do you got for us, Emily?
Yay. Okay. Action item for all teachers and to share with your dancers is to go into a studio with a mirror or in your home with a mirror and find what your true alignment is. Shoulders lengthen towards your tailbone, ribs forward over pelvis, hips, knees, ankles. Where does that fall? And feel stable in that position. It might take you 10 seconds. It might take you 10 minutes. It might feel crazy because you'll realize you haven't been standing in your true parallel placement. But take that time for yourself and then take that time for your students, because That is our foundation of foundations, just a nice little parallel first underneath your hips, making sure that you're always starting in a strong position.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Perfect. So you have your homework. We have our homework. Make sure that you take the Steps Initiative. It is free. So the link is appearing right there on the screen for you. So make sure that you take that. Modules on everything, all the topics that we talk about are available to you. So please make sure that you go and do that. Emily, how can people get in touch with you?
They can find me on Instagram at ebufferd, BUFFERD, or on my website, emilybufferd.com, or on TikTok. Don't judge my TikTok, please, at also ebufferd, or at youngchoreographersfestival.com and at YCF Dance.
Wonderful.
Awesome. We're going to post those up for everybody. And we're going to wrap it up, but I want to thank Emily. You are such a light. And if you're in New York and you are swinging by BDC or Steps on Broadway, look Emily up. Go take her class because it is absolutely incredible, and you will not regret it. So, Emily, can you share your schedule with everybody?
Yes. My schedule is Saturdays at noon on Broadway, Sundays at 9 a.m. at Broadway Dance Center, Wednesdays at 9 a.m. at Broadway Dance Center, Thursdays at 10 a.m., and 6:30 p.m. at Steps on Broadway, and Fridays at 9 a.m. at Broadway Dance Center. And I would love to dance with you.
Go see Emily at either one of those amazing studios. Again, you won't regret it. And Emily, thank you so much for being here again with us. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I love y'all. This was so much fun.
Great conversation. Great conversation. Go back and listen from the beginning. You can find this episode and all of our episodes again on YouTube at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations. If you have an idea for a topic or you want to be a guest in season 4, DM us on any of our social media platforms, or again, hit us up on YouTube, TP Dance Creations, whatever you want to do, Apollo Performance. Get a hold of us. Send us a message. We're easy to get a hold of, and let us know. We're scheduling for late into season 4 at this point, right, Melissa? Starting with the spring. So we're still looking for guests. Message us, and we can't share with you all the amazing topics we have planned. We have an incredible season ahead, and we're pumped to have you with us on this journey. Next week, we will be talking to Tony D'Alelio. He's returning to chat with us again about how we can create gender-neutral performing and learning spaces for young dancers. It's going to be another great conversation. You have your homework from Miss Emily. So you have to go and find your alignment this week. Until next time, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Everybody have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again very, very soon.